Hello, I'm Nelson Ford from the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. And the same guy that asked me to do a video on buying used Smith & Wessons said, now do the 1911. And I'm usually not motivated or led by others, but I just thought, let's just get this out of the way and put them back to back. When you're looking for a 1911, everybody knows I like Colts, so I'm not going to go down that road. Mutilation. It's a tough word to use, but when you see a gun at a gun show with wraparound grips, and I've had guys come to my shop and go, this thing had Packmeyers on it, and when I took them off, I realized the front strap, somebody had tried to checker it. And so wraparound grips might look good on a gun sitting on a table at a show, but they also might be hiding something. And that's a good place to look. Ask them to remove the grips. There's a lot of guys that are muscle bound that put these screws in, and when they put them in, they lock them up against the grip screw bushing that's underneath it, goes into the frame, and they back out both. So the grip sort of lifts up with the grip screw bushing, one and not the other, or both of them. And if it does that to somebody before you get it, you might find that they tried to get that back in there. Now I'll take 10 seconds to let you know how I deal with them, when I have to deal with them. I get both screws out. We'll see, both the scutcheons come out. I walk over to my vise. I lay the grip panel on the vise. I close the vise down on the grip screw bushing. And if you just put it in gently, you close it in gently, you put a good fitting screwdriver on top. Hopefully you don't have Allens. Allens love to strip, and they love to screw heads like to break. I need a diagram, but the Allen goes in like this, and then the screw is down here. And so actually a screwdriver blade, doesn't violate as much as the screw head. And so there's a better bond between the screw head and the shank. But when you have an Allen, it goes down there right down towards the shank, and then there's not as much connecting the head to the shank. And when you try to remove them, I've seen guys snap them off when somebody had red Loctited them or whatever. And so I like the screws much better. But at any rate, I start to put pressure against the screwdriver, and if it starts to turn, I'll put a little bit more pressure on that vise, closing it, and I'll work my hands one and the other until I get it to pop loose. And if you have to tighten it way down, it's not going to be useful back in the gun again. And you need to have, if you're going to be an aficionado that changes grips and wants to be able to deal with this stuff, Brownells or somebody climber has a reamer that's made specifically for these. And I have one. You can clean up the threads if somebody's torn them up. And if there's not enough there to clean up and it's not going to hold a grip screw bushing, you have one chance to go oversize. And I have an oversize, I don't do them anymore, but I have an oversize tap, and it'll run in there, and then you use an oversized grip screw bushing. And the top side, outside the frame is the same. So your grip panel will go on there and the screw will go in. But so there's a lot of peril in the grip area, and a lot of people are looking at sights or the finish or what it says on the side, or it has some neat bobcat engraved in it or crazy grips, when they really should be looking at, do the grips remove properly? Are the grip screw bushings right? And have they put this Packmeyer or Hogue or whoever's wraparound, nice grips, to hide something, an attempt at checkering, some glued on skateboard tape that won't come off. God knows what's underneath there, but that's first point of peril. Wraparound grips, grip screw bushings, I covered both those. Cut for tails. Tails are wonderful. Not all tails get the same cut. The old Jimmy Clark and the first Billy Wilson were almost identical tails, and I used the same jig to cut away metal before I would fit them, to the gun, so we get you a head start. The Browns / Kings of Glendale, California. I think they had a dispute on copying each other. I think Browns was first with it, and then Kings might have had. I don't want to talk about that, but that's a different grip safety cut altogether, and it brings the grip safety up. You have to cut underneath as well as from the back, and that puts you higher on the gun. And then there was a couple others. Ziggy and Tuston started the one that was Bill Wilson's second Beaver tail grip safety, and they just added metal to the Clark or the early Wilson, so it made a scoop looking area for the hammer to go down into. And all these grip safeties use different cutaways. So if one's cut away on the gun and you want to use a different one, or you think you're going to return the gun to original or stock, you're not. When they're cut for a tail, that may be the only tail that you can use on the gun, and if it's a good fitting tail, leave it. All right, that's most of the lower end. I always look at the wells to see what they've done on the wells. Some people add SNAs, other people have different things that pop on and off. How have they cut the inside of the well? What have they done? I like the guns before they're fooled with too much, especially for sights, but we'll get to that in a minute. Action-wise, is the gun safe? You can't drop the slide in front of the owner if you're at a gun show, or most people. They don't like to see that, and I don't either. It's not good for any of the parts, the link, the lower lugs on the barrel. I got them at my store in the chalk tray that are, the lower lugs are cracked off, one or the other. But you let your slide down, put your safety on, and pull the trigger and watch the hammer. If the hammer moves a little, grab onto it and pull back and see if you can hear it or feel it reset, and then pull again and see if it moves again. That means the safety is not fit for it. People think the safeties are interchangeable. They are not. I didn't bring a tool to put the safety back in, but if you just grab onto them and pull, they come out in the center of the switch. Not at the bottom, not at the top, but in the center. So if you want them out, you yank out and you wiggle back and forth towards the center, and it comes right out. And there's a lug on the safety. It's a little circle about this big, and it's got a little cutaway at the top. And it needs to engage the sear fully. And I have, and I know it's not always the correct way to do it, but I've taken the safety, flipped it over, set it on a pre-1981 penny on my anvil, and tapped the lug out so that it would grab the sear and now hold the hammer from letting the hammer move a little. And you might find if the hammer moves a little, when you take the safety off, boom, the hammer falls. And so that would show that the action has been fooled with. If a trigger pull is super light, there's a problem there. These mechanisms, people can say what they want. If they've got race guns with special parts and they want to get down to 2.5, 3 pounds, that's great. They're great shooters. They're responsible with their guns. But if you're just playing in your spare bedroom with your gun at night, and you think you want to put these things down any lower than 3.5 pounds, you're nuts. They're not made for that. And I've called these things, used to call these things in the privacy of my own home with friends, mouse traps. And they are. People can hurt themselves with them, throwing parts into them, thinking they're going to be safe. There's a lot of parameters you got to follow. I had a high cap 1911 come in my shop the other day. I was taking classes with the top shooter in the state, and the hammer strut was rubbing a little line on the disconnect leaf of the sear spring, and the sear spring wasn't cut away on the inside of the frame, so it would miss the frame. And at 6 or 7 pounds, you don't need to do those two things. At 3 pounds, you better do them. It'll cause problems sooner or later. But there's a lot going on the bottom end. Another thing you might want to try is also to see, Colt magazines are always made perfect, and as far as width and height and all those dimensions. The Wilson makes a good magazine. I just don't like anything over 7 because the spring is compromised. At any rate, with the magazine in the gun, and the trigger moving back and forth like this. Believe it or not, in the early trials, the early John Browning 1900, 1902, and then their experimentals, 1907, 1909, and 1910. U.S. Cavalry was testing these guns for them before they came out and won the trials with the 1911. But occasionally they have a magazine in there, and Remington held the patent from 1884 on the magazine. Colt had to pay him for every magazine they put in a gun. But the trigger bow comes out and around the magazine, and if it's not right, and the magazine is bulged a little or wrong, that trigger can stick to the rear, and that's something you can test very easily. I've gotten a lot of mutilated guns in my life because people bring me problems all the time, and I have a trigger bow straightener that the gals over Kings in Glendale sent me 30 years ago, and it's just a piece of metal that you drop the trigger bow on to make sure it has the right dimensions. And that's to be a great tool to latch onto. I'm not sure where you're going to get them because they've been closed for 15 years. But that'll keep the problems with the use a proper magazine and have your bows, straighten your bows, and you won't have problems there. But these actions are fraught with peril. And then when we get to the upper end of the gun, see, I covered safety engagement, hammer follow. You drop the slide of the trigger pull. If the hammer follows, you got problems. And the hammer follow can be caused by 10 different things. And so it's just not one thing you address when you have hammer follow. But we're getting to the top end. Well, we're still in the lower end. I just had a very educated government worker come into my shop. Great guy, I love him. But he brought in a commander, and I looked at it and I said, this thing's only going to feed ball. And kitchen gunsmiths, great guys, they're trying, they want to learn the craft. I'm happy for them. And I cover this in my feed video for 1911 feed work. I just pulled a slide back and then hit the barrel to the rear, and the slide was overhanging the frame ramp dramatically. The 16th of an inch would be a modest figure. It was overhanging the ramp. Somebody had taken the ramp and they kept rounding it because thinking they're going to make it feed. And if you keep rounding it, the barrel is sitting there, and the barrel should come according to Halleck's manual, page 128, field manual, 1911 field manual. The barrel should fall a 16th of an inch short minimum of the ramp, not overhang it, not be even with it, fall short of it. And so you always want to see a ramp fall short of it. And his was the frame was way cut. And guys will take things to gun shows to try to get rid of them when there's a problem. And I always tell people, they say, should I look for a cylinder or should I look for a barrel at a gun show? And I tell them, look down the barrels, look for a shadow, look at those cylinders hard, look for little split marks on them, because the reason they're there is they've already come out of a gun and been replaced, and that's the leftover part. Those things end up on tables at gun shows. But overhanging barrel, big problem. And I hope I don't have to say, always lock the slide back and look down the barrel and see if there's a shadow in it. Because if there's a loop, at least on these guns, you can buy a barrel and replace it. On revolvers, it's a bigger job replacing them. Cut for sights. In 1981, lots of things happened. I got a brochure from Trigicon. They came out in 81. And Millet came out in 1981. In Millet, they did this thing. Their sights were big and sat up on the gun. They're adjustable in the rear. And they put in a big white outline thing that came across the whole blade. And that was easy to see. But up front, instead of using a dovetail or any other method, they drilled 2 3/8 inch holes in the barrel up here. And they had sort of a lip ramp that came to the sides with the blade in the middle, and it took up a lot of space on top of the gun. They sold a lot of those. We saw a lot of those things in the 80s, 90s, and even in the 2000s. You still see used guns with them on there. And they drill 2 3/8-inch holes in your slide. And they come right through. And that's how they attach them. They place them on there, and then they have a tool. You roll it over, and you stick this tool in there, and you hammer on it here, and it flattens the aluminum out. That's a problem, too. The aluminum flattens out, and it holds the sight in place. To repair those 2 holes on a slide is going to cost you $200. I had an incredible machinist that used to machine an area out in the slide, slip a piece of metal in there, high temp it, and then shape it, and I would have to refinish it. And then he could cut in a Novak dovetail cut or any number of things. Usually the Novak cut, it's a great cut. There's a lot of sights that go into that cut, but those repairs are expensive. And when you're looking for a deal on a gun at a gun show, and you don't want to spend $1,000 on a new gun, and you're not sure you want to buy one of the $300 guns, although God forgive me, the Thesis is a lot of gun for the money. They copy the Colt Sear spring, they copy the Colt Sear, they do a lot of wonderful things. But when you're looking for a deal on a modified gun, beware. If you can, take the slide off and look for those holes. If you can, take the grips off and look for mutilation on the frame. If you can remove the grips, you can see whether the grip screw bushings are torn up. A lot of damage gets done with people that crank those screws down. They just don't want to have to check their screws when they get home on their gun. I don't get it. If you own a Marlin lever action, every screw on the gun's going to come loose every time you take it out and put 100 rounds through it. Learn to snug your screws. If you want to use red Loctite, you're on your own. You better be a cigar smoker, because you're going to need a cigar lighter to get those things back out of there. You're going to have to get rid of that red Loctite. Ruger Blackhawks. The Ruger Blackhawks, here's the frame in the barrel, and here's the grip frame, and it's 2 pieces split, 1 piece, but it's split into 2, and that frame likes to go like this, in on the peacemaker, so it's constantly loosening the screws. And when I worked on those, I used to keep the screws on the bottom, because people wouldn't see them. They'd drop out when they were shooting, they'd take the gun home, never know they were missing. So the Ruger Blackhawk, the Colt Peacemaker, the Marlin lever action, you better have a screwdriver if you own those guns, because you're going to have to tighten those screws occasionally. And if you're a red Loctiter, you may back yourself into a corner someday with that stuff. At any rate, gosh, I hope I didn't miss anything. Cut for tails, feed, sights, safety engagement, hammer follow, finishes. Man, some of those finishes are pretty tough. And my machinist who cuts my blades in, Chuck, he doesn't like when I send him up guns with the different finishes on them, because it's a hardened surface. I realize they don't blue them today. They do a lot of painting. And I used to make fun of the World War II British guns that were painted. And then before you knew it, because when I opened my store, there was no such thing as paint on a gun, except for the World War II British guns. But it became common. And they have other names for it, and they have hardened finishes, and they have all kinds of ideas. Craziest thing is when a guy puts a finish on a stainless gun. God forgive the world. You wear through that finish, and then it's stainless underneath. And if you can make a gun rust out here in Arizona, you're very special. We see rain a couple of times, 3 times a year, and it was 118 degrees today. And so we don't sweat because there's no humidity. We just burn off whatever's on our body. And so finishes aren't necessary out here. If you can make a gun rust, you're clever. I understand it's different back in the southeast and the eastern coastal area, and I guess California as well. But in Arizona, we don't have those problems. So I'm thinking about what else to cover on these guns. I think I've covered them pretty well. I'd love to get your questions or comments. They're a lot of fun. My son and I love to read them. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.